We have a very special announcement. We had so much fun at our live show in Chicago. We decided to head back out on the road this fall. We're heading to the 92nd Street Y in New York City on Saturday, October 4th for a live show, and we'd love for you to join us.
Mark your calendars because tickets will go on sale on August 12th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time at 92ny.org.
92ny.org. Again, the big picture will be in New York City at the 92nd Street Y on Saturday, October 4th, and tickets go on sale Tuesday, August 12th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We hope to see you there. I'm Sean Fennessy, and this is The Big Picture, a conversation show about weapons. Today, it's a great day because there's a new Zach Cregger movie out, the multi-character horror thriller Weapons. We'll dig into this twisty, delightful new movie soon, along with another recent horror hit, Together. Later in the show, I'll be joined by Cregger to talk about Weapons. Zach was last on the show a few years back with his surprise horror hit, Barbarian, huge favorite of mine and CR's, simply one of the most exciting new writer-directors to come along in a long time. Zach's super smart guy, fun guest. Stick around for that chat. Later in the episode, we get pretty deep into the movie. But before that, programming note for our listeners, this will be the last proper Big Picture episode in August. Amanda and I are taking a brief break, and we'll be back when we return from the fall film festivals in September in our place on the feed. We're very lucky to have Brian Raftery back hosting another narrative series about the movies and Hollywood. If you haven't had a chance to hear his past summer series on Siskel and Ebert, or Vietnam portrayed on screen, or the Sony hack, check those out as well. You can all find them in the archives of the Big Picture. Now let's hear from Brian about what he has for us this summer. Well, Brian Raftery is here. It's summer, so there must be a Brian Raftery series on The Big Picture. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
So just in a nutshell, explain what this idea was and how you went about pursuing it.
Yeah, the idea was to look at the Bush years, which at one point was the worst presidential time of my lifetime, but now, boy, it looks really good in retrospect. And I know it's been like a joke lately, like, oh, weren't the Bush years much better? And I'm like, they weren't, but they were. So the idea is to look at sort of two big things going on in the early 2000s. One is obviously what's going on in the world post 9/11 with Bush, with Katrina, with this kind of really emotionally tumultuous time, but also looking at these big changes that happened in Hollywood from basically 2000 to 2009. And it was maybe the most kind of epochal shift in Hollywood in my lifetime. You have, obviously, franchises have been around for a long time, but in the 2000s, they really start going with the IP. Harry Potter, Spider-Man, Lord of the Rings, Shrek. All these sort of big franchises. And at the same time, when the decade begins, you have a lot of the carryover from the 90s. You have all these great indie filmmakers. You have these kind of like mini major studios. And by the end of 2000s, they're gone. And it's like the Marvel universe is about to begin. Netflix is taking off. It's like, okay, the Hollywood we knew it had kind of like these last couple of years in the 2000s. So the whole idea of the show is looking at a couple of the really great movies and how they were made, looking at some of the big events and how they were kind of fed into the event, into these movies and vice versa. But also looking at this big shift in Hollywood that I don't think has really kind of been called out because there were understandably more important things going on in the 2000s that we were all thinking about. So, how we went from, the 70s cinema to 3 Shrek movies was not top of mind in 2005, 2006. So again, maybe we should have just been focusing on that. It was probably more fun than dealing with the real world back then.
Did you feel like you had enough of a critical distance from all of these movies to think about how they fit into not just a cultural landscape, but like a genuine world historical landscape?
I think so. I hope so. As you all know, because you've been talking about all year, these movies, some of these movies are now 23, 24, 25 years old. These are old movies.
Yeah.
And I do think you do need a certain amount of distance to understand the time that you're going through and what the art of that time is kind of telling you. And I think 15, 20 years is like a pretty good time. Also, like, I'd really rather just look at the early 2000s right now than look at 2025 in the world.
It's a really good point.
Yeah.
I did think that the movies that you chose, which I think we're going to try to not to spoil in this conversation. We'll see how far we get and maybe people can guess. But I thought that they're all very smart choices. Some of them were surprising to me, and they did all have a tinge of their personal choices. Mm-hmm. You bring to them a reason of maybe not like I was there when this world historical event happened, but you are looking back and remember, okay, this is what stands out to me from 2005 and how I was thinking about the world. And this is the movie that explained it to me. But I was wondering, like, how did you get to that list? Because they're not the most obvious all of the time.
No, they're not always obvious. I mean, I think the first list, because we had a Google Doc at one point, had like 75 to 80 movies. And there are, when you think of the 2000s, I mean, one thing we sort of decided early on was I didn't want movies that were too much on the nose. Like I didn't want to do, if you say to someone, what's a movie about the Bush years? Someone might talk about a very specific documentary. And I kind of didn't want to do that because I kind of want to look at movies that maybe did take 5-10 years to quite realize how they were dealing with the time in which they were made. But there were some really painful choices. I mean, I remember like I cut down the list at one point. I'm like, all right, now we're down to 25 movies. I can't cut a single one of these. And then we cut them more. And I was looking for movies that had a great story behind them because a lot of the show is kind of how these big kind of crucial cultural movies were made. But I also wanted to really look at what was it saying about the Bush years? What was it saying about all these things that were swirling around with a recession, with Katrina, with the war on terror, with, you know, Bush's reelection in 2004? What were these movies kind of saying? And sometimes they're saying things very accidentally. That's why some of the movies are kind of surprising, where you're like, what does that movie have to do with Bush? But you're looking at this bigger picture and this bigger time, and everything going on feeds into the art of that time. So, you know, a lot of these movies are movies that I also personally love. That makes it easier for me to talk about them in an enthusiastic way. And they're all movies I think are really interesting. Even the ones that I don't love as much as the others. I'm like, the story of this movie and its existence is interesting enough to warrant its inclusion.
One of the great moves that you make is to pair movies together in individual episodes. So how did you think about matching or maybe creating contrast in the conversation between and threading them together, which I think is the biggest achievement of the show?
That's really hard. I mean, threading together is one term, kind of like pulling it together at the last minute out of stress.
No,
it's like a college
that's not true.
No, but some of these things you're like, you are looking for a connection, like, because there's one episode where there's two movies that are drastically different in tone, in subject, but they're kind of set during the same period, and they're set in the kind of same industry, and they're set in the same state. And like, even that is kind of like a connective tissue, because one episode is about these two movies set in the past at a time when Americans were just longing for the past. And these two films are saying, actually, like, all that nostalgia for that America that you're missing.
Oh, yeah,
is
I
like,
know this is a good episode.
Yeah, like that nostalgia is for a time that never really existed. And these two movies about the past are actually sort of showing what this country has always been like. So things like that. And, you know, sometimes it's also fun to think of, like, big picture listeners seeing the two titles in an episode and going, what? Like, how do these two movies tie together? And there's a lot of, like, sometimes that can be kind of like a torturous kind of logical thing, but sometimes the movies just fit together in ways that you don't expect, and they kind of comes together in the writing and hopefully in the narration.
What'd you find in the reporting, trying to talk to people about movies that were made 20, 25 years ago, and especially movies that some of them are clear totemic works, or at least hardcore cult movies, and some are just kind of like a little bit forgotten or cast aside in some ways too? What kind of reactions were you getting when you reached out to people about chatting?
I think people are interested in talking about this period, like in the same way that we're all starting to think about it more in the last couple of years. And I think part of it is like that progression of time. I think there's also a recognition that this was a period in Hollywood history where the studios, again, they were leaning in pretty hard on franchises as the 2000s went on. But if you look at some of the slates that some of the studios had in like 2000, 2001, 2002, they're making every kind of movie still. Like, they're really, and a lot of filmmakers were getting we're still getting these kind of big permission slips to go, okay, you have one star, here's $60 million, go make that weird R-rated drama. And I think that's, for filmmakers, this is a time they like too. I mean, it's kind of the same way to that 9/9 book, where it's like, oh, I get to talk about the time when me and all my friends like made these underrated movies that everyone loves now. Sure, I'm happy to talk about that. It's like you're not calling and asking these directors about their third divorce and the studio gig they took that summer to kind of pay for their mortgage. Like, these are things people want to talk about. And I think there's also a recognition that these movies, some of them have become, a lot of the movies in the show are not huge, like, blockbusters. I mean, I don't know if we have a single, like, we have like maybe one that got close to 100 million, maybe two. But like, these are movies that some of these movies everyone knows, and they become culturally really important, and people want to talk about that. And again, the Bush years were weird, and now we have this perspective to talk about all this crazy stuff that happened that we couldn't quite understand or maybe articulate at the time.
So we're not going to give away the titles of the films, but since we're doing context clues, what was your favorite conversation that you had, interview that you had for the show?
I had a bunch. There is one filmmaker whose movie, there is a certain movie that, like, one of the reasons I wanted to do this show is because there's a certain year where a couple of these very big movies came out, and I'm very big on movie years. And there is one film that is very downbeat, very 70s American film that is a comfort movie for myself. For a lot of people, I think some people might have lawn signs about this movie and how much they love it.
Yeah.
And that filmmaker is someone I just respect a lot. And I love the script. I love the direction. And it was also, this person was very grateful for their time. And in the last 20 minutes, this is just Brian Raftery asking questions about this movie he loved. It was sort of like, I'm not going to use this, but remember that scene X? Because like I could talk or think about this movie all day. So yes, I was very excited to talk to that filmmaker, but everyone we got was great. And again, these are movies that I think some of these people realize are maybe beloved, but a little underappreciated in the grander kind of picture of the 2000s.
Does it spoil it to ask what the hardest cuts were? Are we allowed to do that?
Yeah,
Things that will not be featured?
I will say,
what was the last couple movies you cut?
Yeah.
I will say the one person I wanted for the show and I couldn't get because I think he is the defining 2000s filmmaker is M. Night Shyamalan. And we tried to make it, just couldn't work out. And I love his movies. Even the ones I don't love, I love. I think his movies are a fascinating, like the entire Bush years can be told through like the 4 or 5 movies he made during that time. And so that was the hardest cut. Also because I couldn't pick just one. Like I was really trying to, what is like, do you do Unbreakable, which I think is a really interesting like movie about 2000? Do you do Signs, which is like a really amazing kind of accidental 9/11 movie? Do you do The Happening, which is an amazing movie for a gazillion reasons, but M. Night is kind of one person where I felt like, oh, I would have loved to get him, but also I feel like I also would have just gone down a nerdy conversation that would have been very insular about George Bush, Wawas, living in Pennsylvania. I mean, I've interviewed him in the past, and I do enjoy speaking with him. So
it's funny you say that. I was thinking about the list that Amanda and I have been doing on the show as well, and there's not an M. Night Shyamalan movie on the list, and it's for the exact same reason that you described, which is sort of like, all of his movies to me are all like 4-star movies and not 5-star movies. And that feeling of, well, maybe not The Happening. It's not a 4-star movie, but you know what I'm saying.
So it's kind of, it's a 10-star movie for me for various reasons. Yeah.
There's something kind of, I'm just always so happy to have a new movie.
Oh my gosh.
To think about it and to unpack it. And their flaws are always so evident too, but he would have been a great subject for conversation around this. I'm very excited. So we're about to go on a little bit of a break here, and it's been an interesting movie year. So you're like an avid movie watcher. You're really up on contemporary movie culture too.
You were just saying that you've really been at the movies this summer.
I've been in the movies this summer. I was finishing a project and I finally got some free time. So yeah, I've been very happy this summer. I saw Eddington, which I've not been able to stop thinking about, but I will say the most fun movie going experience was my wife and I saw 28 Years Later. I don't want to give away the ending, but I was the only person in that theater who lost their mind happily with that Anchorman ending of whatever that was of the gang show. And I was it's a really fun thing because I love the feeling when you're all in with the crowd. This is one of those things where I was like, none of you morons get how great this is. The AMC 16 Burbank, you're usually a very good audience. You do not appreciate how great and crazy this movie is. So that was one of the most fun movie-going experiences of the year. And also, I went to go see Amadeus in 70mm with my wife had never seen it.
Yeah.
The machine broke.
Oh, no.
There were some technical things, and we wound up watching it finishing at home on Tubi. Still a perfect movie from 70mm to Tubi.
I heard from some people. Actually, our friend Izzy was there too for that screening too, and it broke, and it was kind of a nightmare.
But you know what? God bless them. They really did their best. But at a certain point, we're like, let's go back. But like just seeing Amadeus for the first time in like 30 years, I was like, perfect movie. No notes, as to quote Amadeus. Like it's just like I love that film. So I've been very happy with the movies this year. I've seen a lot of great stuff. I'm still trying to catch up on some things I missed, but yeah, I mean, I have like 3 or 4 movies planned out for the next 2 weeks once my wife's back in town. So.
Anything for the rest of the year that you're really excited about?
I'm very excited for the new PTA movie, obviously,
Sure.
But I'm super excited for The Naked Gun. I've seen the original Naked Gun 10 million times. It is absolutely a movie. That and Pee-wee's Big Adventure, lines from those movies go into my head every single day, whether I know it or not. And like everyone, I'm just like, please make comedies again in the theater. Like, I don't think like Jackass 3 was like the last time. I mean, I whooped it up at the end of 28 Years Later, but like Jackass 3 or so, or maybe 4, whatever it was like the last time I saw a really big comedy with a crowd that was into it. And so I'm really excited for that. And my kids are all in to see it now, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Group, who cares? Yeah.
There's one scene that maybe you wouldn't want to watch together, but maybe not.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah.
They've been through worse at this point.
Brian, thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Yeah,
great.
thank you for
Listen
the
to
show.
Mission Accomplished.
I'm excited for everyone to hear it.
Oh, great. Cool.
Okay, it's just me now. I'm doing this episode by myself, and that's because Amanda and Chris are traveling, and so Weapons being very important to me. I have a lot of deep feelings about it, and I wanted to pair it today with another movie, a movie that came out last week, and I think that's appropriate because they're both horror movies in a sense. We're in the era of what has been unfortunately dubbed elevated horror. It's a catch-all term used to describe a certain kind of genre movie that bore the pretentious weight of being smarter or deeper than your average standard issue teen slasher or monster movie. Of course, there is no such thing as elevated horror. That's just marketing speak to make a movie like It Follows or The Witch, two early examples of this, seem more special, more high value than a regular old horror movie. And the massive success of movies like Get Out and Hereditary mask the fact that horror has always been elevated insofar as it's the most flexible, pleasurable genre to nestle thematic and emotional ideas inside of. I'm fond of saying that horror is my favorite genre because I'm dead inside and it awakens something in me, a kind of giddy sickness that I really find thrilling. But this wave that started roughly a decade ago has persisted with lots of mediocre movies loudly announcing its ideas about trauma and loss and existential despair. It's been good for business. Horror movies are the most reliable non-superhero IP style films at the box office over the last 10 years or so. But it has been a bit of a mixed bag for the art form. And so Together and Weapons are two sides of the same coin. One movie is great, in my opinion, a true standout from a rising voice in the space. And one is perfectly solid. Good time at the movies. They're both mordantly funny. They both have strong performances. One is aggressively sold on its theme, which doubles as its premise. And the other is sold on mystery, confusion, elision, the dark romance of not knowing. That's a feeling I love at the movies. The latter is something that is increasingly rare. It doesn't mean that the latter isn't shot through with big ideas. There are big ideas in the movie Weapons, but they're subtext, unannounced, and kind of ready to be picked over after you've seen the whole piece. But one movie is just pure suspense in the telling, a kind of ticking clock, just waiting to rattle at its conclusion. While the other is diagrammatic. It's an exploration of its idea, a little bit at the expense of its story. So this has been an exceptional year for thematic horror movies from strong-minded auteurs. Sinners is one of the year's great movies, of course. Firmly behind it for me is Danny Boyle's 28 Years Later. Even Eddington, which is far from a pure horror movie, but when you really think about it, is steeped in the same angst and anxiety and provocation that the genre is best at pursuing. And, of course, fitting from Ari Aster, who has a long lineage of horror in his career. So now one of these two movies I'm discussing today may be a turning point of sorts that may be a little bit strong, but I wanted to pin them together because I'm hoping that we start shifting in one direction and away from another. But that doesn't mean that the first movie I'm going to talk about isn't worthwhile or worth talking about. So let's get into it now. So Together is written and directed by Michael Shanks. It stars Dave Franco and Alison Brie, who are, of course, a real-life married couple. The movie premiered at Sundance. I think it was probably the noisiest Sundance premiere of the year, along with maybe a handful of other movies like Sorry Baby. This one was an acquisition by Neon. They bought it out of the festival for a large sum. It played the midnights at Sundance and had people screaming and running in the aisles, usually a good sign. And now the movie has been used to kind of revive the feeling of long legs last summer. Strong marketing, heavy marketing around a gross movie that is indebted to a history of horror movies. It's off to a pretty good start. It's made about $13 million already at the box office. Not bad for an indie. And it's about a couple named Tim and Millie. They're years into their relationship. They find themselves at a crossroads because they move from the city to the countryside. They leave their friends behind. They leave the world behind that they know really well. Millie's got a new job as a teacher in this small town. And Tim, who is a musician who's kind of on the downside of his creative life and is trying to get back to that feeling of special creativity, is doing so while also figuring out if he and Millie are right for each other long term. And so they encounter a mysterious and unnatural force early on in the movie, and it changes their lives, changes their love, changes their bodies. This is a really very modern riff on body horror. David Cronenberg often used these kinds of movies to explore ideas about the self, our desires, our frailties, our overriding urge to control the flesh, right? This movie is more about symbiosis. So Tim and Millie are thrust together at this very distinct stage of their lives, mid-30s, settling in, gearing up for the back half of their lives, slowly becomes a rift on the codependency that forms in long-term relationships. Anybody who is in a long-term relationship with a partner can probably testify. I have several in my life. Of course, my wife, who I love dearly, Amanda and I are in a very long-term relationship here on the podcast. Sometimes you can hear us getting very frustrated with each other. Other times you can hear the natural affection. But there is a kind of reliance upon one another. And Sometimes it's toxic, sometimes it's exciting. This movie is more interested in initially the downsides and then perhaps ultimately the upsides, though it is a little bit more obtuse in that respect. So there's a lot of fun stuff. The setup is a little preposterous and it left me a little bit wanting. So after cracks are revealed in Tim and Millie's relationship early on, they go out for a hike in the woods near their home. Along the way, they get lost and it begins to rain and they accidentally fall into a cave-like sinkhole, like you do when you're on a hike in the rain. And there it's clear that they've fallen into what appears to be a sort of sunken church, and it's decrepit and toxified by some sort of cosmic force that's in the water at the bottom of the cave. This is the same cave that we've seen in the movie's Cold Open, which caused two dogs to become physically fused to one another in a really gruesome introduction. So naturally, I guess Tim and Millie drink the water in the bottom of this cave to survive, which I just found really hard to accept. And then eventually the leads to them becoming not just emotionally attached, but physically attached. They escape the cave, but this kind of sap-like glue begins to adhere them or bind them together. And it's a really stupid setup for a pretty smartly constructed movie. This invisible force keeps pulling them toward each other no matter how they feel about the relationship or even how far away they are from one another. There's a pretty clever sequence where we really understand what's happened when Millie goes for a drive one day. I think she's headed off to work and Tim's taking a shower, and inside of the shower's four walls, he gets kind of bonked around like a pinball because of the way that he is physically connected to Millie as she is making left turns and right turns on the roadway. It's a pretty cool scene. There are a lot of other examples of this. There are some really high tension ones. There's something a little bit strange about the movie, though. Brie and Franco are both very good in this movie. Franco is usually more of a live wire type as a screen presence. Here he's a sad sack. Brie is a little bit more standard fare. She's usually very exceptional as a perky, regular gal trying to make it all work, her new job and her boyfriend with these losery qualities and her domesticated future. She's a really sensitive and smart actor, and she's fun to watch slowly realize and accept that her boyfriend's paranoia about this condition is actually more real than it seems. The movie has a couple of really amusing set pieces that find Brie and Franco being drawn together, their bodies kind of contorting until they're fixed. When they learn that muscle relaxers serve as like a depressant for this force that's keeping them together, there's this great shot chaser scene where they hoover up a bunch of crushed up pills and then this Chekhov's power saw slices them apart. It's kind of worth the price of admission. But it is an unsubtle scene in a series of them. There's another one in which the couple literally becomes stuck together inside of each other while having sex in a bathroom stall. It kind of keeps hammering home its core theme. You know, when you're in deep in a relationship, you can feel stuck, for better or worse. And so the movie resolves itself in a little bit of a groan-worthy way. So that we're kind of deep into spoiler territory. If you haven't seen Together and you don't want it spoiled for you, maybe fast forward a few minutes or so. But eventually the movie decides that the sunken church that we saw earlier in the film, and which Tim eventually returns to investigate, is the former site of an ancient cult that preaches the transformative power of soulmate fusion, in which two people are literally wedded together into a single organism. And Tim and Millie have been resisting making this big commitment throughout the film, and they're magically, almost demonically connected. They fight and they fight and they fight this union until they finally just decide to succumb and be together as one forever. And the movie ends as Millie's parents show up for a pre-planned lunch at their home and discover that Tim and Millie are now one seemingly, binary single person, who I guess we would call Tilly. And so Tilly greets their parents, and it's a little bit of a too cute button on a movie that wants to have it both ways, I think, as like a super serious exploration of commitment and also a gross out physical horror comedy. And Together isn't bad. I mostly enjoyed myself with the movie, and I don't want to pick on it too much compared to Weapons, but it does underscore where I think horror was or has been, what kinds of movies tend to rise to the surface, especially those through the smaller super indies like Neon and A24, versus what old school studio horror suspense films were about and could accomplish, and maybe hopefully will begin to accomplish again soon, which leads me, of course, to Weapons. So Weapons, as I mentioned, written and directed by Cregger. This is his second feature after Barbarian. It stars Josh Brolin, Julia Garner, Alden Ehrenreich, Austin Abrams, Carrie Christopher, Benedict Wong, and Amy Madigan. and it's shot by Larkin Stapley. He shot Everything Everywhere All at Once and a couple of other great films. The log line is simple. You've probably seen the trailers. We've been hyping this movie on the show for a little while, in part because of how much Chris and I really loved Barbarian, and because Amanda and I saw this trailer at CinemaCon, and we were very excited. And even before that, there was news of a large bidding war about this for this script in Hollywood. And there's some mythos, and part of that mythos is around the idea of this being what Zach has described as Magnolia meets Hereditary, which of course is a big fat bullseye for me and anybody who knows what I like. So the story of the movie is one night, all but one children from Justine Gandy's classroom mysteriously run off into the night. Justine and the rest of the community are left questioning who or what is behind the children's disappearance. And so what are the takeaways here? An original horror thriller from a writer-director is my favorite thing in all of the movies. My favorite filmmakers have all more or less worked in the genre. Jordan Peele has been the example I have cited most often since we started doing this show in 2017. He was one of the first guests on the show. And somewhat amusingly, Peele reportedly was really pissed that his company, Monkey Paw, wasn't able to lock down the Weapons script as a production partner when it hit that bidding war stage at studios. It did eventually go to Warner Brothers. And it makes sense. You know, this is a movie that is made in his image. It's made in the image of John Carpenter and Alfred Hitchcock and Polanski and Argento and Park Chan-wook and Sam Fuller and on down the line. There's a long strain of movie history. It's a hyper-taut, tightly structured, engagingly unfolding mystery nightmare. It's a little weird. It's a lot funny. It's very discomforting at times, sharp performances, and an absolute smashola of an ending. So here are 5 things that I really, really liked about this movie. And I'll try to keep it as vague as I can before getting into spoiler territory so people can decide whether or not they want to see this movie. I recommend that you do. It is one of my favorites. So anyway, like I said, it was hyped as Magnolia but horror due to this multi-character interconnected structure. And the structure of the movie is the first thing that I think is really, really impressive. There are definitely some similarities to PTA's somewhat beloved, somewhat maligned LA epic that led to a kind of crash out for him and a reimagination of his career. But in that movie, there is a sad sack, mustachioed cop played by John C. Reilly. And in this movie, there is a sad sack, mustachioed cop played by Alden Ehrenreich. And like the somewhat unstable, substance-dependent woman who disrupts Riley's life in that movie, there is one in this movie. Melora Walters is in Magnolia. Julia Garner, who plays Justine Gandy, the teacher, is in this film. There's some other superficial similarities to Magnolia in this movie. There's the striking needle drops, and really this sense of chaos rippling through a community and then being met by the violent randomness of the universe as like a defining aspect of modern life. This movie, it feels very much in conversation with that. But Cregger's movie is 2 hours. It's compact and it's frenzied in a way that Magnolia is not. It's really a movie about suburban panic that has as much in common with, I think, the Twilight Zone's landmark episode, The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, than like an Altman-style ensemble drama. And the way that each of the 7 key character stories are told is not a tableau about the wide-ranging community of an American city and the class and the generational divide that ripples through. This is a movie about characters literally colliding into each other, confronting the rage and fear that befalls this town when these kids disappear. And where each of these characters' story starts and ends before the next one picks up is this ingenious trick of screenwriting. It's never all in the same place. And it allows for both character development and for the plot to unfurl excitingly, but kind of at the proper intervals. You know, each character gets their own chapter, and where we jump into their life at this stage of this crisis is fascinating. At my screening, there was applause between each chapter section because of the anticipation that Cregger strikes through each section of the story. And as the revelations drew close, the connections from the previous chapters, you could revel in the convergences, right? You got to see this movie in a theater with a big crowd, because the sense of like something has just happened and I need to look around to see how everybody else feels about it really runs deeply into this movie. So that's the first thing, the structure. The second thing is the performances. So just like Barbarian, this is a movie that is dancing on a very narrow line between horror and comedy. Weapons leans more suspense than Barbarian's kind of tonal whiplash from section to section, but by doing the exact same thing that the recent Naked Gun movie did, it really does succeed. So Cregger has cast some serious heavyweight actors, right? Like Julia Garner, Josh Brolin, in a movie that has ghoulish freakouts, tonal absurdity, laugh out loud jump scare reactions, Brolin in particular has one of the funniest post-scare laugh lines I've heard in a movie in some time. In Barbarian, Cregger weaponized Justin Long's kind of affable smarminess so well. And he does the same thing here with Benedict Wong and Austin Abrams, two very funny actors who you wouldn't call comedians, but are very good at pushing comedy in a drama. And then Kerry Christopher plays Alex Lilly. He's the glue of the story. He's the one student who remains after the disappearance of these other children. And Christopher has a really tough job in this film. He is proximate to so much of the madness and has to have a steely reserve once his role in the story is revealed. It's an amazing child performance. And then there's the coup de grace performance in the movie. This is an actor who I did not know was in this movie when I sat down to see it. They're not featured prominently in the trailer. It's Amy Madigan, the longtime actress who you probably know best from Field of Dreams. She is a critical figure in the story, and she brings a wild blend of elderly fragility and warmth and a really horrifying menace. And so I won't say more than that yet. The third thing is the filmmaking. So Cregger, I think, has really leveled up in this respect. The camera in this movie is flying around, and it's always moving. Quick zooms in and out, or on a dolly, following characters, racing down hallways or dark corridors, peering around the corners of whatever terrifying thing is on the other side. The movie is very slick and graceful. It kind of glides along with great pace. I'm reluctant to compare the movie to The Shining for obvious reasons. I think that's a little unfair to it. But when you are watching The Shining, you can feel yourself almost being carried by the camera to the next unnerving image and idea. You're on a journey. And I did feel that same feeling here watching this movie. There's a near constant sense of what's next that the images that Cregger creates combined with the score that he helped to co-write, which drives this woozy concern that is all throughout this movie. And anytime it starts to shift into a character drama about people at a stuck point in their lives, something really scary and seemingly random races into the frame, forcing you to think about this urgent question of what the hell happened to these kids. And there are a lot of mechanical choices that go into making movies like this work, especially in horror. You can feel directors in post-production manipulating the audiences with Foley or score or manufactured scares. And one of the things that I like about Weapons is that the scary moments, and there are 3 or 4 times when you really want to close your eyes or look away, are not really like that. They're constructed, of course, they're written, but they're upsetting and tense in part because they're logical manifestations of what the characters are going through. And when those characters are attacked, poked by needles, stabbed, thrashed by oncoming traffic, you can feel the mania of this world being unleashed. And it's all disturbing and fantastical, but also very grounded. Which leads me to themes. This is the 4th thing that I think is really special about this movie, and this is really what differentiates it from Together. Weapons is about something, of course. It's not an ornate metaphor, however, whereas Together is an extended metaphor. This is a child abduction movie. This is a movie that you can watch purely as a plot exercise, as a corker, and it is a corker. I'll cite a few movies that are kind of in the tradition of this when we get into the syllabus at the end of this conversation that I'm having with myself. But it's really a movie about losing someone you care about and the sad desperation that it creates in us and the way that it can infect everything, the way it fosters paranoia and causes you to reach for horrible answers that don't exist but start to feel real, and then you have no other place to go but to get committed to these answers that you've invented in your own mind. You know, I have lost people very close to me in my life, and I this idea resonates with me really deeply. And the 2025 movie that Weapons neatly maps onto that would make for a nifty double feature is David Cronenberg's The Shrouds. They're made in entirely different registers, but they're about the same feeling of panic and despair and awful decision-making in the face of death. And unlike Together, which takes this quite literal approach to its big idea in an effort to quote-unquote elevate the material, Weapons mostly just plays as a crazy movie that keeps escalating with purpose, without the rising power of an elevator. It is going up incrementally and getting crazier and crazier and higher, but not too fast. And if you don't want to tangle with Cregger's big feelings inside the movie, you really don't have to. It features some indelible horror movie images, gnarly kills, great music, and last but not least, the ending. So I have talked in the past about the feeling I get in a movie that I'm really enjoying and starting to realize that I love when we get to the final stretch. So I start leaning forward in my seat and I start pulling at the fabric in the movie theater chair armrest. I've talked about this while watching, I don't know, the final 15 minutes of Whiplash is an example. I think I talked about that in the Rewatchables episode that I did with Bill some years ago. And the bowling alley sequence of There Will Be Blood is an example of this too. When a movie is kind of piercing my skin and getting into my bloodstream. And Weapons' final 15 minutes did this for me. So we're getting into major spoiler territory here, but the final 2 segments of the film reveal not just what has happened to the 17 children who go missing, but who was responsible and how it happened. This is a very difficult needle to thread, and I suspect some may feel let down by the hype machine that I am helping to power on this podcast. And I must admit, an initial feeling of kind of queasiness as I started piecing together that, and again, we're in spoiler territory here. In the construction of the movie, Aunt Gladys, who comes to stay with Alex and sort of take over his life, is a demonic witch who's controlling these children and her family and wreaking havoc on this town. And I thought at first, like, a witch? I don't know. That seems a little pat. But it's what the movie does with Gladys and what Amy Madigan brings to the character that quickly shifted my confusion or slight letdown into a kind of fascination. And then the movie sets you up for this incredible moment of joy. So Gladys's powers of mind and body control are really fascinatingly rendered in this movie. They're not just supernatural, but she almost becomes like superhuman. She starts to feel like Zod from Superman in the way that she can kind of presage another character's actions, get the upper hand, and then until she doesn't. And when she doesn't, her plan backfires, and our core characters are kind of relieved of their hypnosis, and then the kids are freed from one version of mind control and locked into another, and they begin racing up the stairs at the end of this movie. And when the kids started racing up the stairs, and the moment of recognition of her loss of power that Madigan expresses, and you know that we are about to watch something pretty crazy. I didn't realize how crazy by the time we got to the end of it, but pretty crazy. I haven't been that locked in a movie theater seat in a long time. I could feel my knees shaking and my feet tapping and the hair standing up. And as the kids started crashing through the windows and over the yard fences and across the backyards of their town, really to annihilate their terrorizer, they tear Gladys inch from inch in an extremely gory and hilarious denouement. I just let out a huge burst of sigh of relief laughter. You know, this is like an exciting, insane, gory, funny, euphoric convergence. And what starts out as this cold Fincherian character study morphs into a relationship drama, and then into a detective movie, and then into a stoner comedy, and then into a witch horror, and then into Cannibal Holocaust. And it's just delightful. It's expertly made, and it is so exciting to have something like this. You may be listening to this and thinking like, you're overselling it or you're overhyping it. I'm just saying, for me, this is my favorite stuff. This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Having the right people in your corner can make all the difference. Fall festival movie season is upon us, and it's always a really stressful time here at The Big Picture. Luckily, I have Amanda at my side to help me determine what movies we're going to see, which ones she'll take care of, and I also have my family at home taking care of me, and I'm really grateful for that. And like those people, State Farm is there to help you choose the coverage you need. With so many coverage options, it's nice knowing you have help finding what fits for you. Go online at statefarm.com or use the award-winning app to get help from one of their local agents. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. It did make me think of a lot of movies, and I didn't want to do a syllabus as a standalone video or on social ahead of time because I didn't want to give away not just the reveal about Aunt Gladys, but about all of what I perceive to be the myriad influences. And if you listen to my conversation with Cregger a little bit later on, you'll hear him kind of like not only pitch his influences, but kind of joust with some of the ones that I suggested. Nevertheless, these are some movies that I think you might find interesting if you really dug Weapons and can see pieces here and there. The first is the British horror film Village of the Damned from 1960, which is about a micro-generation of children who are all conceived and born on the same day, who all have shocks of blonde hair and who can emit powerful energy from their bodies. The movie was later remade by John Carpenter in a less successful remake with Christopher Reeve. But the eerie quality, the oddness of little kids and what is really going on with little kids is really exemplified in this movie, which is kind of schlocky and hasn't aged super great, but it's still kind of fun as an originating text of mid-century horror. The next movie is Rosemary's Baby. There is a lot of, I thought a lot of Casanova and her insane scheme with Rosemary in this movie in the final stretch, and you'll see the makeup choices that are made for Amy Madigan kind of fit with Ruth Gordon's look in that movie quite a bit. The other one is somewhat obscure. I don't think Zach was thinking of this movie, but it is a good fit for a syllabus. It's The Blood on Satan's Claw, which is a British folk horror from 1971, directed by Piers Haggard. And it's about a town, and specifically a group of young children who are exposed to Satan's remains, literally his skeleton, and it causes some devilish changes inside of them. A little bit of that in this movie as well. I thought of The Stepford Wives and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the Philip Kaufman version from 1978 quite a bit. Cregger he said he was not really a body snatchers guy, but there is something about body and mind control and the idea of a prevailing force that overtakes our consciousness and our physical form that is a huge part of what transpires in the second half of Weapons that I think makes a lot of sense. I also kicked Ordinary People to Cregger. He didn't really vibe with that one, but Ordinary People is a movie about a family in the suburbs who don't really know how to deal with tremendous loss. In the case of that movie, which is Robert Redford's directorial debut and a movie that won Best Picture, a family, Donald Sutherland and Mary Tyler Moore, have lost a son, and their other son, played by Tim Hutton, is trying to figure out how to cope with it and go forward. And all of them are kind of at cross purposes and dealing in different ways. And this is definitely a movie about, Josh Brolin's father character who makes it his mission to figure out what happened to his son. But also it becomes a movie about the dawning realization of what you didn't say, how you didn't take care of your family and communicate with your loved ones in the way that you felt you should have when they were here and in front of you. And there's a particularly scary but emotionally effective scene between Brolin in a kind of dream state. This is a riveting moment in the movie where he is in this kind of dream state. He's been sleeping in his son's bed. He gets out of bed and he thinks he hears his son, I believe his name is Michael, leaving the house. And he follows him out of the house and he follows him through the neighborhood and he follows him to another house. And when he gets to another house, he sees this image of an assault rifle high in the sky. And it's as close as Weapons gets to a kind of Lynchian moment. And it's unexplained. And we're meant to accept the dream logic of this moment for Brolin's character. And when he goes into the house in which the assault rifle appeared over the roof, he finds his son sleeping in a bed and he tells him how he feels, how what he wished he had said to him when he was there, when he could reach him and touch him and talk to him, and how important he is to him. And he's breaking down. And just as he's breaking down, a terrifying thing happens, in part as a kind of manifestation of the fact that he's engaging with this like post-traumatic psychosis. And Ordinary People is not a horror movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it kind of is. Kind of taps into that feeling of deep, unimaginable loss and our inability to resolve the feeling and to just accept it over time. And Weapons is a really good example of that too. I thought of some other movies too that are maybe a little bit more fun than Ordinary People. The Witches of Eastwick, the George Miller movie, popped into my head in terms of what witches can do in terms of casting spells and controlling minds and bodies. There's some really fun stuff in that movie, especially a kind of bravura sequence with Jack Nicholson in a church being controlled by the three witches in that story. I thought of Carpenter and They Live and the idea of living in a society where not all is as it seems. And as a companion to that, I thought of The Burbs, the Joe Dante movie, which is one of the simultaneously funniest and scariest What's in That House movies. That movie's a huge movie for my wife, and she grew up loving it, and so we always like to watch The Burbs, and there's definitely a little bit of The Burbs in this. Shortcuts from Robert Altman is one of the signature influences on Paul Thomas Anderson, and his movie Magnolia owes a great debt, not just to the big sprawling ensemble movies that Altman made like MASH and like Nashville, but but also to Shortcuts in 93, the Raymond Carver adaptations about lives of people living in Los Angeles at a certain time in history and the ways that they connect or do not connect. I thought of Adam Egoyan's The Sweet Hereafter, the 1997 Russell Banks adaptation about a community that has lost a large number of children to a terrible accident, and the way that people don't really know how to cope with that and what happens in the aftermath of that. I've mentioned Magnolia. I thought a little bit of Todd Field's Little Children, which is an adaptation of a Tom Perrotta novel about the insecurity and quiet desperation of life in the suburbs, which is a movie I've always liked, starring Kate Winslet and Patrick Wilson. In terms of pure standard issue horror, I think James Wan's Insidious is the movie that has the most similar kind of visual palette and the way that young children intersect with this kind of psychotic nether region. Feels like there's something going on there too that's in conversation. It's obvious that Prisoners, the Denis Villeneuve, Roger Deakins child abduction film that is a little bit of a mystery movie, a little bit of a movie about grief, a little bit of a movie about Hugh Jackman yelling extremely loudly, is a big influence on this movie. You can hear Zach talk about that as we get further on. And then, of course, Barbarian, which I think a lot of people have probably seen by now, is streaming on Netflix. If you haven't seen it, it is a movie that is different but connected to this movie. Zach Cregger, he loves basements. That's one thing I'll say. You know, basements figure into this film as well. Weapons is really exciting. And I think you'll get even more excited when you hear me talk with Zach Cregger about it. So let's do that right now. Zach Cregger is back. I'm so excited. We're here to talk about Weapons. This is very exciting, Zach.
I'm so excited to be here, man. I really enjoyed our last conversation, and I was hoping that we'd get to do it again. And so this is a treat.
So I read that Weapons was written before Barbarian. Is that true?
That's not true.
Well, before it was released, though.
That is true.
Okay.
Yes. So yeah, I wrote it while I was in the edit.
So can you describe for me the day you started writing it? Do you remember what happened? What spurred it?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was like a terrible time for me. You know, so it's not really a secret. I've talked about it before, but you know, Trevor Moore, who I was in the Whitest Kids with, died very, very suddenly and terribly, and I was, you know, going through it, you know, and I was just feeling all the feelings. I'm still feeling all the feelings, you know. I'm not like in the clear. And so I just sat down to just start writing, just to engage with my pain in a way that was, you know, not destructive but constructive. So I wasn't sitting down to write a movie. I was sitting down to just write, to soothe myself and to just tell myself a story about who fucking knows. But like, it was very clear to me as I was writing what I was doing. And so I started with the first line, you know, girl's telling a scary story. And okay, so she goes to school. What happened to her teacher? I mean, literally sentence by sentence, I'm discovering the story as I go, which is how I kind of wrote Barbarian. And, you know, as I got through the cold open and these kids left, it just felt really like soothing and correct. And I knew, okay, I've got a teacher. I've got an angry parent. I kind of knew like that's a good place to kind of aim my beginning, and then let's just see where it goes. So in a way, it was like another really fun process of discovery, and I didn't really have an ending, you know. And so when you write something like this, where you start with the question but you don't know the answer, it's a little daunting because you might not be able to land the plane. And so I probably got about 50 pages in before I kind of figured out what had happened, why these kids did what they did. And that was a good day because I was like, oh, I think there's an end to the story that I enjoy. So hopefully other people will.
The ending is arguably the best part. So we'll get to that shortly.
Thanks. It's funny how many people seem to have the opposite attitude.
Well, I think there is a fine line between the explanation and the ending. And I think that I wonder what the take is there. I don't want to, we'll get there shortly. Did your life change at all after Barbarian?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it did.
In what ways?
Well, I mean, in ways that I no longer was aspiring to hopefully one day get my big break. and direct a movie, and Barbarian surprised me and surprised people. And so it felt like, okay, it looks like I'm going to get to make another movie. I wasn't prepared for the reception that the script for Weapons was going to get. And so that felt, like very much new territory. It was like, okay, I get to make a movie, and I get to make a movie with actual resources this time. Barbarian's a $4.5 million movie, and Weapons is about, in the neighborhood of 40. So it was a big shift. So yeah, that was definitely different. However, I will say this. The only silver lining to the just awful chapter of Trevor's death was that I was allowed the opportunity, or I don't know if it's an opportunity, but I was basically given the chance to write for the sake of urgency and just a genuine place of creativity, as opposed to a place of ambition. I was spared from thinking, what's my Barbarian follow-up? That wasn't really available I couldn't think that way. That's not how I felt. And so I think that, whatever people tend to enjoy about this story is probably just because it comes from a place that is not, it's not ambitious. Now, I'm not going to pretend like, oh, I'm like such a pure heart creative. I mean, I definitely had to go back and put my thinking cap on and try and fix it. My first draft was a total mess, and I had to think, okay, if this is a movie, how can it work? So, that stuff is there, but the impetus for it wasn't like my follow up,
It's really funny that you say that, though, because the next thing I wanted to ask you was that there is something very free, and I wrote down the word ambitious about this movie, about even the idea that you could make a movie like this, given where you were at that stage of your life. And that I was curious if making Barbarian, if you had tried to write a movie like this after that movie came out and everybody told you, oh, you're so great, most exciting new voice in horror, would you have been stricken somehow or unable to kind of conceptualize something that doesn't feel kind of stuck in a lot of the typical modes of contemporary horror?
I don't know if I'll ever know the answer to that question. However, I wrote, right now I'm prepping for a movie that I also wrote after Barbarian and long before Weapons. And, I don't think this one is a product of ambition. And I think it's really fun and careless. And I mean that in the best way, And then the movie that I hope to do after this, I also wrote before Weapons. And I think it's maybe the best thing I ever wrote. So I don't know. I mean, I've been able to kind of psych myself out of thinking ambitiously for whatever reason. The thing I wrote now, I was like, I'll never direct this. So I'm just going to say who gives a shit and just not care, which is, by the way, the best attitude. If you don't care, you're doing it right. If you care, sometimes I think that's dangerous. Anyway, so we'll see. I don't know.
Let me ask you about that then, because one of the things that strikes me about the new movie, is the filmmaking feels like a big step up. It feels like more assured. The sound and the score is really impressive. The way the camera moves is kind of amazing. You. And it does feel like a movie that is written by a guy who's like, I know exactly how to direct this movie. So to hear you say,
that's the way I felt.
It is. Okay.
No. But yeah. Because when I'm writing, I'm watching the movie as I'm writing. And so I definitely know what I want. When the script is done, I have the movie in my head. And so I feel like that was the other thing is the sale was intimidating and crazy. But I really didn't think, oh, what if I'm not up to the task? I have an arrogance in me. And that arrogance is that I know how to make a movie like this. And so I was able to just kind of go for it.
Was it intimidating at all to have this large budget and these more famous people in your cast and just a grander scale and the aftermath of a bidding war? Or were you like, this is exactly where I want to be?
No, it was where I wanted to be. I felt like I had a clear mission and I was able to, get people that could execute the mission. I was intimidated to meet Josh Brolin the first time, for sure. And that was a crazy, I really didn't do a good job of my first impression with him. I was supposed to go meet him at his house. I sent him the script. I was supposed to go meet him at his house. We're meeting at noon. It's about 11. I figure it's take me an hour to get to Malibu from where I live in the East Side. And so it's it's 10:45 maybe. I'm getting ready to go. And I get this phone call from my agent's assistant and they're like, where are you? I was like, what do you mean? They're like, Josh has been waiting for you for 45 minutes.
Oh,
I'm like, Dude, I drove like an idiot. I tore my way, and then I ring the doorbell, and I'm sweating bullets, and I don't have a good excuse. I was building Legos in my house, just like not doing anything. And he just opened the door and was just like shaking his head. He's like, "What are you doing, man?" And I was just like, it was just like, "Hi, please respect me and be in my, trust me." It was a gnarly way to start our relationship, but he's cool, dude. I mean, it was good.
He kind of brings that energy to the performance, though, in a good way. So maybe that was helpful.
What, like a disapproving?
Yeah, just like frustrated. Like, what's your problem, dude?
Yeah, yeah, maybe.
Tell me a little bit about the filmmaking. Like, I was really struck by how the camera is constantly moving, zooming in and zooming out, and it feels like it's on a dolly following people, and it's always going around a corner and looking for something new, and that felt very exciting.
Yeah. One of my inspirations for that was Son of Saul. Have you seen Son of Saul?
Yeah.
And I just think that's, I'm very interested in like hypersubjectivity. And so that was something that Larkin Seipel's my DP. And that's something that we talked about a lot is like, every chapter should be hypersubjective. And so we should always be in a POV or an OTS and, really just living in the perspective of who we're following. And so that was kind of a rule that we set for ourselves really early on. And it just felt like the correct way to tell the story is to just be perched on the shoulder of each protagonist. And it was pretty clear early on that that's what we do.
Related to that, one thing that I really like about this movie that I think distinguishes it from a lot of its contemporaries is that it is extremely story and character forward. It doesn't mean it doesn't have themes, but it's not doing a thing that I think you find in a lot of horror where it's sort of like, let's announce the theme and then hold your hand through the theme of the movie all the way through. When you get to the end of this movie, you can think about that. Is that something that comes naturally? Is that something you intellectualize, or is it just you're doing what you want to do and telling the story you want to tell?
Yeah, well, I really try not to intellectualize anything really when I'm writing. So no, I mean, honestly, this is like, it started with me kind of obsessing over how I felt about Trevor. And then the end of it is me kind of obsessing over my dad. And I don't know how those two things connect, but somehow to me, they did. And so it's a very personal movie. I don't have a statement. The movie's not political to me. It's a completely introverted kind of diary entry. So, yeah, I don't even know if I just answered your question, but
no, you did.
Okay, cool.
I heard you say something funny as well, that the way that the kids are running, leaving their homes is something you did just because you thought it looked cool and didn't have some like broad Easter egg rationalization to it.
No, there's no meaning there, but it does to me, it just invites a little more kind of speculation. It's like if they just ran out normally, it'd be like, oh, that's weird. But if they all run out with a kind of bizarre posture, then it's like, okay, there's another dimension at work here, and I don't know what it is. And so it just felt provocative.
When you're pursuing ideas like this that are, genre focused and a little left field, like, do you have sounding boards? Do you have people that you're sending this to or saying like, what if I did this? Or is it very private?
It's pretty private. I got stuck on Weapons early on, and I did have like a kind of a brainstorm session with a buddy of mine who helped me kind of unstick. So that was, that was good, but I don't do that too much. I'm definitely not one of those like, let's go to dinner so I can pitch you my movie kind of guys.
Okay.
I'm right in seclusion a little bit more.
Did you rehearse with the cast?
No. I mean, one scene, the bar scene with Alden and Julia,
Mm-hmm.
we took a weekend and we ran that like at my house in Atlanta for just a couple of hours, but we were already in the middle of production. So no, I'm definitely not a big rehearsal guy. Not for any reason. I don't have anything against rehearsal, but schedules being what they are, people are flying in midway through and it just wasn't really available. We did a table read over Zoom, and that was kind of like the rehearsal, honestly, which is like, I don't love doing a table read over Zoom. That's pretty awful. But so yeah, no, not so much.
Were you very tight to the script during the making, or was there room?
Yeah, very tight to the script. Yeah. I think there's a couple of ad libs. I don't want to pretend there's none, but but generally it's pretty much verbatim.
Yeah, I was curious about that because the movie is so tightly constructed. And I was wondering how much of what you filmed, like, is everything that you filmed in the movie because of the way that the narrative unfurls?
No, there's a scene where Alden goes to a doctor and gets his hand checked out, and the pacing didn't work. There's a scene where James the junkie goes to a drug dealer to try and like sell his little like gizmo that he stole, and he gets like punched in the face and like kicked out, which is a really fun scene, but it just felt like we got to move, and so they were pacing considerations, but only those two, I think.
How many times can Austin Abrams get punched in one movie, I guess, is a question to ask yourself.
Yeah.
Question about writing scare scenes. So when you're writing one, and there's a few really good ones in this movie, are you writing what scares you or what you think scares other people?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. It must be what scares me. I mean, if there's, I tell you this, I'm not sitting on something that's terrifying to me that I wouldn't dare put in a movie. If I have access to anything scary, believe me, I'm going to try and capitalize on it. So I think it's probably both.
Well, I ask because there are some recurring, the fear of being poked is something that pops up a lot in this movie.
Let me think about that. What do you mean?
Well, needles.
I mean, obviously we have the needles,
silverware,
and the forks,
sharps. Just the sharp sticks piercing the finger.
Yeah.
This idea of being penetrated by something sharp and blood appearing, and then that being a kind of recurring image in this movie is unmistakable.
I'm not the first horror movie to utilize being stabbed with things.
You're zooming in right on bleeding fingers a few times in this movie,
Yeah, fair.
There's not any Freudian subtext there to someone getting underneath your skin?
I mean, there very well may be, Sean, but I haven't yet identified it.
Well, there's like a second layer to that too, which the movie literalizes, and I thought was really interesting, which is kind of the fear of infection. At one point, Paul asks about, do you have AIDS?
Some of that is sprinkled in on purpose, Yeah.
Yeah, like even
just got the parasites on TV, and she's teaching a lesson on. I mean, yeah, I'm taking a page out of every movie ever made where someone's teaching a class, and they have to kind of explain the subtext of the movie and the lesson. So I'm guilty of that.
I think it works really well, and I don't know if I would have glommed onto that if I didn't get a chance to see it a second time. So it's not.
Have you seen it twice?
I did.
Far out.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I kind of snuck into the premiere, and then I saw a press screening.
You were at the premiere?
Yeah, it was really fun. It was that crowd was cool. That was a great way to see the movie.
I haven't been to enough premieres to know if our premiere crowds just kind of fish in a barrel. I think probably yes.
Yeah, they are. Everyone's full of shit, and they're like, "This is my best friend's movie." But
yeah,
the applause at the chapter breaks was incredibly cool, and just made the movie
that was surprising
feel fun in a way that is unusual. Yeah. Anyway, how about the way that comedy leaks into the movie? We did talk about this when we talked about Barbarian and using, your previous life as a creative person and making it fit. This is different. This definitely leans more classic suspense horror, but there are a couple of laugh moments. Brolin in the bed is like one of the hardest moments I've laughed in movies in years.
Rolling in the bed is a line I put in because I thought it was funny. Beyond that, I got to be honest with you, because I've been hearing this a lot lately. It's like, so much comedy in this. It's such a comedy. And I was a little like, is it really? I don't think of this as being a funny movie. That Brolin in the bed line, sure. Can't really think of another one where I was like, this will be funny. I was like, maybe Austin when he's on the phone calling about the kids and seeing the wanted poster. To me, I get that's funny, but I'm surprised people are taken by the. And I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying.
I think it's because you have this combination of actors too, like Austin, like June, even like Benedict Wong, who are like pretty funny. They're not comedians, but who are kind of naturally funny, and so they feel comfortable riffing in an otherwise extremely tense moment in a movie.
Absolutely, and I do realize, when I'm casting, I have to have people that are funny. Even Josh is very, very funny, and Alden is like, dude, Hail Caesar. Alden is like the funniest person in the world. So like. I definitely, that is a requisite for someone I want to work with, is they have to have timing, but to me, it's like, I hope it's funny in like I'm not comparing myself to Alexander Payne, but that sort of like kind of dry humor that can like bloom a little bit here and there, but it's always a little funny. It's kind of what I hope I'm able to do. That's what I'm always kind of aiming for, but I don't know if I'm successful.
Seeing the movie at the premiere, I did not know Amy Madigan was in this movie before I saw it. And you brought her on stage. And did you say you're my angel? You used a very warm descriptor of her.
No, I said my dream come true.
My dream come true. That's what it was.
Which is true.
And she's amazing and obviously very important to this movie. But why did you say my dream come true to her? And how did she come to be in the movie?
That part is so... It's just such a a balancing act. You need somebody who can be completely ebullient and spunky and disarming and kind of inviting in a repulsive way. And that's a tough one. Who also has like a lethal cold reptilian core that is readily accessible. And you watch Amy in Field of Dreams, and you get side A, and then you watch her in like Gone Baby Gone or Carnival, and you get side B. And it's like, okay. And so I met with her again in Malibu. I guess everyone's in fucking Malibu. I drove out and had lunch with her at this restaurant, and I was driving out there, and I kind of knew, I was like, God, I just knew like she was going to be right for this part. But I have a habit of like offering people roles very impulsively. And I was like, don't offer her the part, Zach. Like, leave the lunch, tell her you're still in the process, and you'll get back to her. Like, be cool. And dude, I'm telling you, before the lunch hit the table, I was like, only you could play this part. You have to play this part, because she just sitting there and looking at her and kind of just studying her. I was just like, this is it. Like, this is the person. Like, she has everything I need, and she's so cool, and she liked the role, and she got it. And I was just like, there's nobody else. So I just lucked out. That's a hard role. You write it and you're like, I hope there's a human being that can do this. And then you get Amy Madigan and you're like, thank you, God.
You can see the movie going belly up if it's the wrong person, because
dude, could you imagine?
Yeah. I think, and that's kind of related to what I assume you're hearing a little bit of the feedback on. And the movie is really interesting because the mystery of it and the fact that, Josh's section is very much like a detective story. You've got a cop on the case. There are all of these elements that are very Fincherian thriller through the first hour or so. And then it does take a hard turn into metaphysical, supernatural horror movie stuff. And it feels like, I'm curious if you feel like you are intentionally wrong-footing the audience, with the exception of a handful of the scares, and maybe that's what some of the reaction you're getting, because the conclusion of the movie is like absolute thrill a minute, ripping the cushion out of your movie theater seat. But you have to get on board with the big choice you make to explain what is going on.
I didn't set out to wrong foot the audience. I just wrote the movie that just felt like what the movie wanted to be, so I'm not doing it on purpose. I'm aware, that Barbarian is a very divisive movie. And I think that the main criticism that I hear again and again is like, first half great, second half stupid, I didn't sign up for that. And
that was my review. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard you. So I think I am sensitive to that, but I also am like, whatever. Look, all I want to do is write my favorite movie and make my favorite movie. And this is what I like. So, I can't really care about anything other than what am I going to sleep soundly having made? So I don't know. This is it.
I have a bad habit as a movie dork of telling people what movies they should watch after they've seen a new movie. Like, oh,
okay.
Like pulling
I like
from
that.
this,
I think
pulling
that's that's fun. Yeah.
Do you have?
What do you say?
Well, for this one, I'll pull up my list if you want. There's like a bunch.
Yeah, dude, do it.
Okay.
I'll throw out the ones that I would lob out there, and they're so obvious. They're the lowest hanging fruit, and it's like not creative. That I would say, Magnolia, Hereditary, Prisoners, Picnic at Hanging Rock.
Oh yeah, okay.
The Son of Saul, just visually. And, Pulp Fiction, I never thought about Pulp Fiction. And then everybody is saying it's got a lot of Pulp Fiction. I'm like, you know what? I would be the biggest liar in the world if I didn't say Pulp Fiction changed my life when it came out. So that's got to be baked in there. And then I heard you say this because people were telling me to listen to your bidding episode, which I did. And when you said the Needful Things trailer, I was like, dude, that is in there, because I had the same feeling when I saw the Needful Things commercial on TV. I was like, that's the movie for me. I am all in. And the movie I imagined was not the movie I got when I watched Needful Things. But the movie I imagined when I saw that trailer was just like a very special movie. Yes. And so maybe the promise of that trailer seared something into me that I always wanted. And I think it could be some sort of subconscious, aim toward that.
That's a good one. I mean, I had a few of those movies on the list, obviously. Magnolia for sure, because the trades have just been pushing the Magnolia but horror.
And that came from me, by the way. They asked me, like, how would you like us to describe this tonally in the trades? And I said Hereditary meets Magnolia. So I'm culpable of that.
That's interesting, because I do feel like there is certainly the multi-character kind of some of the convergence of Magnolia, but I don't know. Your movie feels
the cold open is a direct homage to the Magnolia cold open, and the mustache that Alden Ehrenreich wears is literally. Literally, we went to the whatever. I'm just going to make a bad joke.
Listen, man, trust me. I know, as somebody who lived with Magnolia deeply in 1999. Yeah, I get it. And even like Julia being a little bit like Melora Walters in some ways, and their kind of fucked up relationship. I get all that.
I didn't even think about that. Yes, I mean, totally.
There's totally some of that. But I just meant like your movie is a suburbs movie. Magnolia is a city movie.
Yeah, for sure.
And there is a different energy to those things. What I'm telling you about your own movie. I wrote down Rosemary's Baby. That's definitely feels like some Rosemary's Baby in it.
Okay. Not in
like the slow
dread. Yeah. That's fun. Oh yeah, and of course, obviously, yeah.
I mean, all the Body Snatchers movies.
Okay. Those aren't big for me, so maybe I'm going to take your word on that. But those don't loom large in my.
Ordinary People. Did you ever see that?
You know what? Long time ago.
I mean,
it's not a big one for me.
Suburban families struggling to cope with loss and looking for answers that don't exist
sounds fun.
It's a blast. Best Picture winner. Did you ever see The Witches of Eastwick?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Again, that's not a big one for me.
Okay.
Although I do love George Miller, so you'd think I would have, given it more time.
You don't have to say you like it. Just something that occurred to me. This is my bad habit.
Sorry, I wasn't clear on the rules of this.
What about Little Children?
Yeah, I saw it when it came out. I saw it in the theater. I thought it was cool. I haven't seen it since.
Okay, look at you, just not enjoying all the movies that I thought of.
No, I love it, dude. It doesn't mean I don't like them. There's some movies that matter in a weird way, and there's others that you really like, but they don't.
What is it with you in basements?
Oh, I don't know. They're just fun. It's easy. It's just easy. Look, Barbarian, I was very nervous about having a basement scene in this movie because of Barbarian, but that's where the kids were. Oh shit! Major spoiler. Sorry, everybody.
I will have spoiled already by this episode.
Okay, cool. But that's just like, I got James in the house and I was like, dude, this is the only move. And honestly, Sean, like, I really mean this, and I don't mean to sound obnoxious when I say it, but I try so hard to just turn my brain off when I'm writing completely, and to just really be absent from the creative process. So I just let it be what it is, and so that's what it was.
Where does this movie take place?
Maybrook, Pennsylvania, which is where I kind of thought Prisoners took place in Pennsylvania. I found out later, I think Prisoners was supposed to take place in Maine.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I was thinking about, Deacon's photography, and I was just thinking that Prisoners just visually so phenomenal. And it's weird because, we're shooting in Atlanta, and I was just like, well, I'm never going to find the prisoners neighborhood in Atlanta. I want to shoot this up in, I want to shoot in Vancouver or Seattle or somewhere, Oregon. And then I found out they shot Prisoners in Atlanta, and I went to that neighborhood. It actually wasn't quite right for what we needed. So it's funny, I was like the dog that caught the mail truck there, and I realized, it's not. That's not the right vibe. So
I wouldn't. I don't know. Is it communicated that it's Pennsylvania? Maybe I just missed that when I was watching the movie.
I mean, no, you wouldn't know. Okay. It's like the license plates say Pennsylvania. I think his badge says Pennsylvania or something like that.
Is it present day?
Yeah. Rin cans,
Right, of course. What was when you were making the movie, was there anything that didn't work or you couldn't make happen that you had conceived of?
Great question. No. Oddly, no. In fact, the denouement, with the final chase for the kids, running around. So in the script, that was actually just Gladys runs outside, they jump out the window, they get her in the front yard. And then as we were in prep, I was like, you know what, dude? Like, I think that if we go Raising Arizona with this, we go full Point Break, like it's going to really, people are going to walk out with a smile. And that was not a cool conversation to spring on your line producer and everybody. Like, I think we're going to need 4 more days, and 5 more locations, and we're going to destroy houses that we got to find, and just please let me do this. But to everyone's credit, nobody was like giving me the hard pushback. Everyone just kind of like, this is going to hurt, but we're going to make it work. And thank God we did. I honestly think that I think it changed the movie.
I mean, 2 things about that. I do want to hear you talk about it a little bit, because it is absolutely thrilling. However, you said you're not writing a lot of laugh lines, but there's literally a cutaway to a guy mowing a lawn and the kids run through the yard.
And of course,
it's like,
obviously, I knew that was going to be funny.
That's a great joke moment. You know, you said Raising Arizona.
I shot that scene twice.
What do you mean?
Because the first time I shot it with a guy, it just wasn't coming together. And I was not happy with how it worked. And then my boom op, who's like this metalhead, Marty, what's up, Marty? He's like, sleeve tattoos and like metal. And I was like, if I put a flannel shirt on this guy, he's going to look right. He's going to look like somebody out of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And I was like, can I just shoot that again with Marty? And again, they were like, come on, Zach, but they let me. And I'm glad we did because, Marty, my boom op, was definitely the right dude for that.
I mean, it's a great, very small break in an otherwise very, very exciting final stretch of the movie. I noticed you have a credit on the score. And
I
think I listened to the score yesterday while preparing for this, like a psycho. It's a very weird thing to just listen to standalone. Not exactly the most melodic thing in the world, but it is like very, very involving and effective. And I thought maybe you could tell me a little bit about what you do in that process and what you were thinking with your collaborators.
So my collaborators are my two childhood best friends, Ryan and Hayes Holiday. They're brothers. I've been in a band with them forever. Like we were in a band in college, and we got back together. And when they moved out to LA, and we played a lot of music together. We share a musical mind, and they're wildly talented guys. They're way more talented than me. But what I know about those guys is that I can communicate psychically with them what I want, and so. This process was, I kind of know what the music should be for every scene. And with them, I can just be like, dude, take that little can thing that, we all worship and sprinkle in a little bit of this weird song that we've all heard before. And it should be kind of like, and they can just do it. They can just do what I want, what I have in my head. And so some of the songs in there I did write and perform myself. And some of the songs they wrote and performed all themselves. And then some of the songs are just kind of all three of us just kind of jamming together, and I'm very happy with it. I think it's a cool score. It's what I wanted. And so yeah, and I'm going to use those guys again and again because I think they're so brilliant. And I got lucky.
It's really effective. I've also had at least two people now say to me when we were talking about the movie, as soon as Beware of Darkness hit, I knew that I was going to love this. That there is a tone set. There's only a handful of needle drops in the movie, but can you just talk about how you made those choices?
Well, as I was writing, I was listening to some music, and Beware of Darkness came on when I was in the writing process, so I vomit 70 pages out in LA, right, that are a mess. And then I go to my manager's house who lives in the woods in the East Coast. And I just am alone for about 3 weeks. And I don't do anything but wake up, write, eat, write, sleep. That's it. So in that process, I was over there and I was listening to Beware of Darkness, and I was like, this is it. It was just like a bolt from the blue. I was like, there's no ambiguity. This is the song that will play in the opening montage. That song cost, I'm not going to tell you, but it hurt. That hurt to get that song in this movie, but I think it's worth it. And then we have Percy Sledge, and we have a Handsome Family song. I really like that Handsome Family song is a song that has just been really important to me for a long time. I like that the music is melancholy in this. I don't want the movie to be melancholy, but I like that there is a blue undertone to everything. It feels right.
You're making a Resident Evil movie.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about that?
Pretty pumped. It's going to be not at all like Barbarian and Weapons. It's going to be just a rock'em sock'em. It's for me to play. It's for me to turn my brain off and just make a Evil Dead 2, get crazy with the camera. Austin Abrams, who played James, is going to be my guy. So it's just Austin is the movie. I love Austin. We had an amazing thing together. And I think it's a weird, fun, just wild story. And it's not doing any of this shifting and reinventing itself. It's this movie follows a person from point A to point B. And it's weird in that way that it's just a real-time foot journey where you just go deeper and deeper into the depths of hell. And it's really a love letter to the games because I love those games. And so it's kind of my kind of homage to them.
Indulge me for 1 second on this. One of my favorite things about your first two movies is that they are exactly what I am looking for at the movies, which is original, intoxicating suspense with great performances and laughs, and pretty much something that is indebted to a lot, but unlike anything I've ever seen before. That's my
Thank
number.
You, Sean. Oh my God. Well, that's the nicest thing I've heard in this process.
It's true,
thank
man.
You very much.
And it is something that I really care about and that I really dig. It's literally why I'm doing the show. Resident Evil is IP, and we're in the IP era.
Sure.
And,
okay, fair. However,
and balance that. Like, help me understand it.
Yeah. Resident Evil is IP. I've never seen a Resident Evil movie.
Oh, wow.
I've never seen one. And I played the games obsessively. This is a story that comes from a healthy creative place. This is a story that I would have wanted to write, whether I got Resident Evil, the IP, or not. I just so happened to be able to, to have these Resident Evil people be down. And so I get to play in their sandbox, and I'm honored to, and I'm stoked that I get to tell a story that I actually love. I don't need to do this. I'm in a healthy enough place where I can go make a different original movie, and it's fine. I'm doing it because I think this movie's going to be fucking awesome. And so, I get that it's IP, and I get that there's people who are going to be like, why? And my hope is that when you see Resident Evil, you'd be like, no, I get it, dude. That was awesome.
You have my trust. I'm not questioning you. It is curious to me, though, because I think there is an urge for when someone emerges in the way that you have in the last few years, or kind of like, keep going, keep pushing, keep forcing studios to keep making movies like Weapons,
And I tell you this, right after Resident Evil, I'm working right now. I have a script that I was alluding to. It's a sci-fi thing. It's my favorite thing. And I'm probably going to hit the ground running right after Resident Evil and go get into that, And so I'm definitely like, I have more original things in me, but I consider Resident Evil an original thing. And I think you will too when you see it. It's not, so yeah. I don't know what else to say.
You have my trust. I'm not trying to give you a hard time. Just something that is.
I don't think I know you're not going
to.
I'm talking to you, but I'm also talking to
the haters,
imaginary haters out there. So yeah.
Zach, we end every episode of the show by asking filmmakers what's the last great thing they have seen. You're traveling. You're around the world. Any plane movies? What do you got?
Oh man. And I've seen so much great stuff lately. Let me hang on. I want to give you such a good answer, but I'm worried that I'm going to just like blow this because I didn't think about this in advance. You know what? I really enjoyed the Jaws 50-year anniversary Jaws doc. I thought that was like so fun. You know what I love, dude? I loved how vulnerable he was about being traumatized by that process, and how he had to go and like cry for a while and like heal, and it's still a sore subject. And it just I was so nourished by that, because it's like, dude, I really went through the ringer making Weapons. I had a collapse, honestly, near the end. I really did. Like, my body kind of failed on me. I was exhausted. We were doing 6-day weeks, double shifts. Me and Larkin were shooting with the crew, and then we'd wrap the crew and then shoot with second unit into the night. 6-day weeks, dude. And at a certain point, I just kind of I crashed, like in a weird way that I've never crashed before. And it was hard. And I had really awful dreams about being on set for like almost a month after. And it was gnarly. And to hear somebody have that, and to know that like this guy had a truly miserable time making a movie, and yet he made arguably what many people would call the greatest movie ever made. Not the greatest film ever made, but the greatest movie ever made. I'm not the first person to make that distinction, but it doesn't. You can make something really wonderful and suffer all the way through, and you don't have to suffer all the way through. I don't think that's a prerequisite. But I was just really encouraged that the process is the process and the result is separate. And I think that was just really cool to hear from a master.
I really like that. You did remind me of one last thing I wanted to ask you about, because all the crazy physical media heads are like, when will I get the Barbarian 4K? They're mad.
I joined their chorus, and I have banged the drum and made phone calls and tried my best to get some sort of physical media, and I'm not making headway. And it kind of bums me out.
I only ask because, part of the relationship that we built with Jaws obviously was not just watching it at home, but like the special features and stuff and the documentaries and all the stuff that was attached to learning about the making of that movie. Your movies, it would be fun to watch and learn and see the things that you did in your movies too. There's a mythologizing that is kind of important when you get to a certain stage as a filmmaker.
I love watching the making of, sometimes as much as watching the movie.
That's what I'm saying.
I bought the Panic Room DVD and I watched all 3 of them. And I think those things are amazing. I like the prep and the post and the whole deal. I like watching David Fincher talk about how we're going to open a floor safe for 17 minutes. It is like, to me, that's great. So selfishly, I want people to watch me boss other people around and look cool. You know what I mean? But first of all, we don't have any footage like that in Barbarian because nobody cared enough.
Okay.
But we did do special features. Those special features are available on the iTunes purchase. So there's a commentary and there's the featurette and stuff like that. But I hear you, man. I would love it to be physical.
Zach, you're the best. Congrats on Weapons. This is very exciting, man.
You're the best. Sean, you don't know how important it is to me to do this with you. It means a lot to me. I love your mind, and I really love what you're doing. So thanks for having me.
The same goes 2x for me. Thanks, man. Good luck with Weapons, dude.
Cheers.
Thanks to Zach Cregger. Thank you to Brian Raftery. Please stay tuned on this feed for Mission Accomplished. It's an awesome show, and I know if you love movies and stories about making of movies and how they fit into the culture at large here in this country and abroad, you will find that story fascinating. Thanks to our producer, Jack Sanders, for his work on this episode. I wanted to send a special shout out to Sam Birdwhistle, who's been helping us with research and guiding us through the 25 for 25 project this summer. He's been a great help. Thank you to Sam. And we are taking a break, as I said on the show, for the next few weeks. I'm really excited to be taking a break. I'm probably going to have a slightly healthier relationship to watching movies and thinking about movies over that break. I'm really fired up, though, to get back and get out to the fall festival season. I really want to have a really great fourth quarter on the show with Amanda, and I'm pumped about a couple of the movies I've already seen that I can't talk about yet, and a couple of the movies that I will be seeing in the fall. And it's going to be PTA September when we get back too, man. So just don't forget, great things ahead. Have a great summer. Thank you as always for listening and watching this show. It means a lot to us. We'll see you again soon.